Adeline Dean's carriage stopped before Stirlingwood Manor. The house was enormous, its stone facade dark and imposing. She clutched her satchel, the letter from her mother, inside a constant reminder. Her family's survival depended on this job. The housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, was a severe woman who wasted no time on pleasantries. Lord Devereux expects order, punctuality and silence, she stated, her voice clipped. You are here to be invisible. Do you understand, Miss Dean? Yes, Mrs. Gable. As she was led through the main hall, Adeline noticed the portraits of stern-faced ancestors. On the main landing, a large, ornate frame hung empty, a strange void on the wall where a portrait of the lady of the house should have been. Lord Marcus Devereux met her in his study. He was a handsome man with a disarmingly kind smile. "Welcome to Stirlingwood, Miss Dean," he said. "This can be a quiet house. It has been so ever since we lost Lady Seraphina." He sighed, the picture of a grieving husband. "It is my son, Darian, who feels the loss most. I must ask for your patience with him. He can be difficult." Adeline soon learned that difficult was an understatement. She met Darian the next day. He leaned in a doorway, tall and impeccably dressed, watching her work. He looked at her, as if she were something unpleasant he'd found on the sole of his boot. "You're the new one," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. I'm Adeline Dean." He circled her slowly, his eyes filled with contempt. "Tell me, Adeline Dean, does my father pay you well?" he asked, his voice a low insult. He does have a taste for them, the quiet, humble ones. His comment made no sense to her, but the malice was clear. It was the beginning of a quiet torment. He would create messes she had to clean, countermand orders to make her redo her work, and appear suddenly in rooms, his silent, angry presence designed to unnerve her. Adeline met it all with quiet dignity, which only seemed to make him angrier. The situation came to a head 3 weeks after she arrived. It was late, and Adeline was carrying a water pitcher down a corridor. Darian appeared from the library, his steps unsteady. He was drunk. "The little mouse," he slurred, blocking her path. "Excuse me, sir," she said, trying to step around him. He moved quickly, slamming his hand against the wall to trap her. The pitcher fell from her hands and shattered on the floor. He leaned in, his breath heavy with whiskey. "What are you so afraid of?" he demanded. "I'm not afraid," she lied, her voice shaking. He laughed, a bitter sound. "You are. I can see it." His gaze was invasive, humiliating. "You must be a virgin, right? Never been touched." I bet he reached a finger toward her collarbone. "Is that what he likes? Does it make him feel powerful?" "Please, sir." "Stop calling me that," he snarled. At that moment, a voice cut through the corridor, cold and sharp. "Darian." Lord Marcus stood at the far end of the hall. He walked toward them, his face unreadable. He didn't glance at Adeline or the shattered pitcher. His eyes were locked on his son. Darian pulled back from Adeline as if he'd been burned. "From the moment this young woman arrived, you have been nothing but a nuisance," Lord Marcus said, his voice dangerously low. "You dishonor yourself, you dishonor me, and you dishonor the memory of your mother." "Don't you speak of her!" Darian shot back. "This behavior ends tonight," Lord Marcus declared. He finally looked at Adeline, but his expression was not one of concern. It was one of cold calculation. "Miss Dean, as of this moment, your duties as a housemaid are rescinded." Darian scoffed. "So you're throwing her out because of me? How noble." "On the contrary," his father replied, "she is being elevated. And you, Darian, will be her chaperone. You will spend every day with her. You will dine with her. You will oversee her education. You are now responsible for her. Perhaps in the process, You will finally learn how to be a gentleman." The shock was absolute. Darian stared at his father, his face pale with disbelief. "You can't," Darian whispered, his voice raw with horror. "Father, you can't make me." Darian's defiant shout, "Father, you can't make me," echoed in the stone corridor, a raw cry against an unmovable object. Lord Marcus did not raise his voice. He simply looked at his son, his eyes holding a cold, absolute power that smothered all rebellion. "It is done," he said. He turned and walked away without a backward glance, the finality of his exit like a door slamming shut. Darian stared after him, his body vibrating with a silent, helpless rage. He shot one look at Adeline, a look of pure venom, as if she were the sole architect of his humiliation, before he spun around and stormed off. Left alone with the shards of the broken pitcher, Adeline's shock began to curdle into a profound sense of dread. She was no longer a maid, but she was not a lady. She was a pawn in a cruel game between a father and a son. The following days were a nightmare of awkwardness. Her maid's uniform was replaced by a simple day dress that felt like a costume. At breakfast, she was seated at the enormous dining table, with Darian at the far end, his silence a tangible weapon. Their routine was an exercise in mutual misery, a suffocating dance of forced proximity, where he radiated resentment and she responded with cautious civility. The shift happened late one evening. Adeline was on her way to her room when she saw a sliver of light from under the door of a rarely used sitting room. A soft thud from within made her pause. Fearing an accident, she gently pushed the door open. The scene inside stole her breath. Darian was slumped on the floor against a large armchair, an empty bottle of brandy lying beside him. He wasn't asleep, he was just broken. His head was bowed, and his shoulders shook with a silent, contained grief. He looked utterly helpless. Forgetting her fear, she rushed to his side. "Sir, Mr. Devereux, are you all right?" He looked up, his eyes unfocused and swimming with tears. The sight of the proud, arrogant man so completely undone was jarring. "You should go," he slurred, his voice thick with shame. "You can't stay on the floor," she insisted, her voice soft. "Let me help you up." She put her hands under his arms and tried to lift him. He was a dead weight, all resistance gone. As she struggled to pull him to his feet, her own footing slipped on the polished wood floor. She stumbled, and they both went down in a tangle of limbs. When they landed, his head was in her lap. The shock of the intimate, accidental position held them both still for a beat. Then, a shudder ran through him. A single tear escaped his eye, then another. He turned his face into her dress, and the silent grief that had been shaking him broke open into quiet, heartbroken sobs. It wasn't the loud crying of a man in a drunken rage, but the desperate, lost weeping of a child who had been holding his pain inside for a decade. He was crying for his mother. Instinct took over. Adeline forgot she was a maid. She forgot she was his father's pawn. She was just a girl with a boy who was hurting. She gently placed her hand on his head and began to stroke his hair, murmuring soft, meaningless words of comfort. She held him as he cried, offering a simple, human kindness he likely hadn't felt in years. After a long while, his sobs subsided. He lay still, his breathing ragged. He slowly became aware of where he was, of her hand in his hair. He looked up at her, his face streaked with tears, his eyes filled with a raw, mortifying vulnerability. "Adeline Dean," he whispered, his voice hoarse. It was the first time he had said her full name with such clarity. His gaze was desperate. "Don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone you saw me cry. Promise me." "I promise," she whispered back without hesitation. He held her gaze for a moment longer. A silent, secret pact forming between them in the dark. He had trusted her with his deepest shame, and she had not turned away. The next day, everything had changed. The open hostility was gone, replaced by a quiet, secret understanding. He still didn't speak much, but when he looked at her, it was not with contempt, but with a guarded, searching intensity. And when she looked at him, it was not with fear, but with a profound sympathy that he now knew was genuine. The change was not lost on Lord Marcus. He observed them from doorways and across the dining table, his sharp eyes missing nothing. He didn't know what had happened, but he saw the result. He saw that the weapon he had chosen to discipline his son had instead become his son's ally. He saw that he was losing control. As he watched them from his study window, a book open but unread in his hands, his expression hardened into one of cold, calculating fury. The girl had failed her purpose. It was time to remind her of her place. The axe fell the next morning. The tense, unspoken understanding between Adeline and Darian had held for a full day, a silent rebellion that Lord Marcus observed with chilling stillness. Adeline was in the library, as per her schedule, when the butler, Mr. Finch, appeared at the door, his face as impassive as ever. "Miss Dean," he said, his voice flat. "His lordship requires your presence in the study." Now, a cold dread washed over her. This was it. The summons she had been waiting for. The walk was silent. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each step a final march toward her fate. In the study, Lord Marcus closed the door, the soft click of the latch sounding as loud as a gunshot. He gestured to a chair opposite his desk, but he remained standing. "You have misunderstood your role here," he began, his voice devoid of any previous warmth. He was no longer the charming patriarch. He was a strategist assessing a failed tactic. "My lord," Adeline whispered, her hands clenched in her lap. "Your purpose in this arrangement is to provide a challenge, a friction. My son is willful, arrogant, and ruled by sentiment. These are weaknesses. You are here to be the whetstone against which these weaknesses are ground down, not the pillow upon which they are rested." The cruelty of his words was breathtaking. He had seen their new bond and interpreted it as a malfunction in his machine. I don't understand." "Then let me be perfectly clear," he said, leaning his knuckles on the desk. "Your softness is counterproductive. Your sympathy is poison to the lesson I am teaching him. From now on you will be formal. You will be distant. You will offer him nothing but cold civility. He is to find no comfort in your presence. Is that understood?" She thought of the broken boy who had cried in her lap. Lord Marcus wasn't trying to heal that boy. He was trying to kill what was left of him. "And Miss Dean," he added, his voice dropping to a silken threat, "remember why you are here. Your family is depending on your success, and your success is defined by my satisfaction, and my satisfaction alone." The threat was clear. Her family's survival was tied directly to her participation in this cold-blooded torment. She was trapped. "Yes, my lord," she said, the words tasting like ash. "I understand." The change was immediate and brutal. The next morning, Adeline was polite, reserved, and utterly remote. She answered Darian's questions with a simple yes or no. She kept her eyes down. She walked a careful 2 paces away from him at all times. Darian noticed instantly. The secret pact between them had been violated, and he was left confused and angry. "What's wrong with you?" he demanded, on their second day of this new, cold war. They were in the library, the silence stretching for an hour before he finally broke it. "Nothing is wrong, sir," Adeline replied, her voice flat. "Don't call me that," he snapped, standing up and pacing in front of the fireplace. "You haven't called me that since, you know." "What did he say to you?" She kept her eyes on her book, though the words were a meaningless blur. His lordship merely clarified the nature of our arrangement. "And what is that, precisely?" he bit out. "That you're to act like a terrified automaton." He stopped in front of her, forcing her to look up. His eyes were stormy with frustration. "One moment, we had an understanding. The next, you look at me as if I am a stranger." Seeing the genuine hurt beneath his anger was a new form of torture. She wanted to tell him the truth. She wanted to warn him about his father. But the threat hung over her head, sharp and heavy. "I am simply behaving as is appropriate," she said, hating herself for the lie. "Appropriate?" he scoffed, throwing his hands up in exasperation. "This is his game, Adeline, don't you see? He is moving us around like pieces on a board." He did see. He saw part of the truth, and that made it even worse. He stalked out of the room, leaving her in a silence that felt heavier than before. Their days became a tense dance of push and pull. Darian, refusing to accept her retreat, would try to breach her walls. He'd bring up a shared memory of that night, ask about her family, or make a dry, witty comment, trying to coax a genuine reaction from her. Each attempt was a fresh agony for Adeline. She would parry with polite non-answers, her heart aching with the effort to betray the promise they had made. The breaking point came a week later. Adeline was in the walled garden, the one place she felt she could breathe, when Darian found her. "We need to talk," he said, his voice leaving no room for refusal. "Sir, I do not think—" "Stop," he commanded, his frustration boiling over. "Stop with the sir. Stop with the lies. I know he threatened you. He controls everyone in this house. But I will not let him control you. Not like this." "You don't understand," she pleaded, her resolve crumbling. "Then make me understand," he implored, taking a step closer. The desperation in his eyes was her undoing. "I know I was a monster to you when you arrived. But that night on the floor, that was real. I trusted you. Don't tell me that meant nothing to you." She couldn't deny it. Her silence was her confession. "I won't let him win," Darian vowed, his voice low and intense. He reached out and took her hand, his grip surprisingly gentle but firm. "I won't let him turn you into one of his empty, broken things. I won't let him do that to us." The word hung in the air between them. U.S. His thumb stroked the back of her hand, a simple gesture that felt more intimate than a kiss. Adeline was caught. Her mind screamed at her to pull away, to obey Lord Marcus and protect her family. But her heart, which had recognized a kindred soul in this broken, angry man, refused to listen. To obey the father was to betray the son. To trust the son was to risk everything she had in the world. He stood there, holding her hand, his stormy grey eyes searching hers for an answer. The choice was hers, and in the oppressive silence of Stirlingwood Manor, her decision would be the first real move in a game she was never meant to win. The question hanging in his eyes. To obey the father was to betray the son. To trust the son was to risk everything. Adeline looked from Darian's desperate, hopeful face to the cold stone walls of the manor that represented his father's suffocating power. Her choice was clear. She could not be a party to such cruelty. Slowly she squeezed his hand back. "I won't let him win either," she whispered. A wave of relief washed over Darian's features. For the first time, she saw him smile. It was a small, fragile thing, but it transformed his entire face. In that moment, they were no longer a master and a maid, but conspirators. Allies. Over the next few days, their secret alliance blossomed in the shadows of Stirlingwood. It lived in stolen glances across the dinner table that made Adeline's cheeks flush. It existed in the brief, electric touch of his fingers against hers as he passed her a book in the library. He was still her chaperone, but the resentment was gone, replaced by a protective warmth. Lord Marcus watched it all, his jaw tight, his silence more menacing than any outburst. He was a spider, watching them weave a web in the corner of his own. One afternoon, Darian found her reading in the garden. "Come with me," he said, his voice low. "There's something I need to show you." He led her away from the manicured lawns to a secluded, almost forgotten part of the estate. Under a weeping willow, half hidden by overgrown ivy, was a single, weathered tombstone of white marble. Etched into it was the name, Lady Seraphina Devereux. "My father had this made a month after she disappeared," Darian said, his voice hollow. "He told me she was buried here." Adeline stared at the cold stone, her heart aching for the boy who had been forced to grieve at a lie. "I need to apologize, Adeline," he said, turning to face her. His gaze was direct and heavy with unshed pain. "For how I treated you when you arrived. There is no excuse, but there is a reason, and I want you to know it." He took a deep breath. "I was 12 when I saw him. My father. He was in the west drawing room with a maid. The same way he looked at her. It was the look he was supposed to reserve for my mother." The memory was still raw. 2 weeks later, my mother was gone. He just told me she'd gone on a trip. Then a letter arrived, saying she had fallen ill and died tragically. He showed me this spot, told me to say my goodbyes. He looked at the tombstone with disgust. I never believed it. Not really. I think she saw them that night. I think he broke her heart, and that's what truly killed her. The image of that wretched man, my father, and his betrayal. It has been burned into my mind ever since. So when you arrived, another maid in this house, I took all of that pain and anger out on you. It was monstrous, and I am sorry." His confession was a raw, open wound. He had given her the key to his deepest pain, trusting her completely. Overwhelmed by a wave of compassion so strong it felt like an ache in her own chest, she reached up and gently touched his cheek. He flinched slightly at the contact, his eyes wide and vulnerable. To comfort him, to show him he wasn't alone, she leaned in and gave him a soft, friendly peck on the lips. It was meant to be a simple gesture of solace, but when she pulled back, their faces were only inches apart. His stormy eyes searched hers, and the air between them shifted, crackling with an energy that had nothing to do with comfort, and everything to do with a profound, undeniable connection. The world fell silent. There was only the sound of their breathing and the heavy beat of her heart. A touching performance. The voice was ice. Lord Marcus stood a short distance away, his face a mask of cold fury. He had seen it all. Darian immediately stepped in front of Adeline. "Father, leave us." "Leave you?" Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "To continue this pathetic little melodrama? I think not." His eyes landed on Adeline, full of venom. "I gave you an order, Miss Dean. You were to be his lesson. It seems you need a lesson of your own." "She has done nothing," Darian said, his voice a low growl. "She has done everything," Lord Marcus roared, his control finally snapping. "I saw this sentimental weakness in you and tried to burn it out, and she has nurtured it like a weed. Your duty is not to her. It is to your name. It is to the marriage I have arranged for you with Lady Annabel Crofton. Her fortune is the only thing keeping this family from ruin." The truth, in all its brutal, transactional ugliness, was finally revealed. "I will never marry her," Darian stated, his voice flat with finality. Lord Marcus looked at his son as if he were a fool. "You have no choice. The contracts are already being drawn." He then turned his cold, dismissive gaze on Adeline. "And you? Your services are no longer required. Go to your room and pack. A carriage will take you away at dawn." The words were a death sentence to the fragile hope that had just been born. "No," Darian said, grabbing Adelina's arm as if to keep her from vanishing. This isn't over. Lord Marcus merely smiled, a thin, cruel expression of absolute victory. "Oh, Darian," he said, turning to walk away. "It already is." Lord Marcus's final words hung in the air, a verdict delivered with chilling finality. He was gone, leaving Adeline and Darian standing by the fake tombstone in a silence shattered by the cruelty of the truth. Adeline felt the blood drain from her face. It was over. The fragile, beautiful thing that had just begun between them was to be crushed before it ever had a chance to grow. She was to be sent away, her family's lifeline severed, her name disgraced. "He can't do this," Darian said, his voice a low, furious tremor. He turned to her, his eyes blazing. "I won't let him. Go back to the house, but do not pack. Do you hear me, Adeline? Do not pack." She looked at him, her heart breaking at his defiant hope. "He can, Darian," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I am his employee. He is a lord. He can do whatever he wants." The reality of her powerlessness was a cold, hard fact. "Not to us," he insisted, grabbing her hands. "Not anymore." He stormed back to the manor, leaving her to follow. Adeline knew it was hopeless, but a tiny part of her prayed he was right. She waited in the grand hall, too afraid to go to her room, listening to the muffled sound of shouting from behind the closed doors of Lord Marcus's study. The confrontation was short and brutal. Darian emerged minutes later, his face pale, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He had the look of a man who had charged a stone wall and found it unbreakable. He walked over to her, his earlier fire extinguished, replaced by a cold, grim resolve. "He has me trapped," he said, his voice flat. "He made it clear. If I defy him, he will see both our families ruined." The finality in his tone was her undoing. The last ember of hope died. She nodded, unable to speak, and turned toward the stairs to go and pack her things. Later that night, a soft knock came at her door. It was Darian. He stood in the hallway, his face etched with a pain that mirrored her own. Her packed satchel sat by the door, a testament to their defeat. "He thinks he's won," Darian said, stepping into the room. "He has," Adeline replied, her voice thick with unshed tears. She tried to be strong, for his sake. "You must do as he says. Marry Lady Annabel. Save your home. Please just forget me." "Never," he said, the word a solemn vow. He crossed the room and took her face in his hands, his touch gentle. "Listen to me, Adeline. This is not the end. He thinks he's won because he thinks I am still a boy who fights with anger. But you've changed that. He has only started a war." He looked into her eyes, his own burning with a new, cold fire. "I don't know how yet, but I will find a way to break his power. I will come for you, no matter how long it takes. You must believe that." "Darian, promise me," he insisted. "Promise me you won't give up on us." A tear finally escaped and traced a path down her cheek. "I promise," she whispered. He leaned in and kissed her, a deep, sorrowful kiss filled with the desperation of parting. It was a promise sealed in the dark, a final moment of rebellion before the dawn. The morning was grey and cold. A simple, unmarked carriage waited on the gravel drive. Adeline walked out of the great house for the last time, her small bag in her hand. Lord Marcus stood on the steps, a picture of calm victory, ensuring his orders were carried out. Darian was there, too. He stood a short distance away, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He didn't try to stop her. He didn't speak. Their eyes met across the space between them. And in that one, long look, he repeated his promise. "I will come for you." She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, then turned and got into the carriage, The door closed, shutting her away. As the carriage pulled away from Stirlingwood Manor, she didn't look back. Darian watched until the carriage was a speck in the distance. When it was finally gone, he slowly turned to face his father. The grief and rage were still there, but they were now buried under a layer of ice. The look on his face was no longer that of a rebellious boy. It was the face of a man with a singular, cold purpose. Lord Marcus placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his tone patronizing. "Good. Now that the distraction is dealt with, we can begin the preparations for your wedding." Darian looked at his father, his eyes empty of all emotion, but one: resolve. "As you wish, father," he said, his voice perfectly even. The game was not over. It had just begun. Weeks turned into a month. At Stirlingwood Manor, Darian played the part of the dutiful son. He was calm, compliant, and attended every meeting regarding his impending wedding to Lady Annabel Crofton. His quiet obedience unnerved Lord Marcus far more than his fiery rebellion ever had, but the proud lord mistook it for a son's final, broken surrender. He was wrong. Every night, while the manor slept, Darian waged his secret war. He wasn't looking for a weapon. He was looking for the truth. He searched his father's study, poring over old ledgers and forgotten documents, looking for any clue about his mother. He found it in a small, locked box tucked away in the back of his father's desk. A small bundle of letters, tied with a faded ribbon. They were from his mother. All of them were postmarked from a small town in the north, the most recent dated only a year ago. They were filled with desperate, loving pleas to see her son, and bitter accusations against her husband for intercepting her correspondence and threatening her into silence. The final letter contained the truth. She had left after catching him with a maid, not out of weakness, but because she refused to live under the thumb of a cruel, hypocritical man who valued his reputation more than his own family. Darian now held the truth in his hands. It was time to end the game. The engagement ball for Darian and Lady Annabel was the grandest social event of the season. The ballroom at Stirlingwood glittered with jewels and aristocracy. Lord Marcus stood before his guests, a glass of champagne in his hand, the picture of a proud, successful patriarch. "To family," he toasted, his voice ringing with false sincerity, "to legacy, and to the future, which begins with this wonderful union." The crowd applauded. As the noise died down, Darian, who had been standing silently beside him, stepped forward. "Father, you speak of family," Darian said, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the room. "It is a shame the most important member of our family cannot be here to celebrate." He turned his gaze to the grand ballroom doors. Or perhaps she can. On cue, the double doors swung open. A woman stood silhouetted in the entrance. She was elegant, poised, and instantly recognizable to the older guests. A collective gasp went through the room. Lord Marcus's face went white with shock. It was Lady Seraphina Devereux. She was alive. She walked into the ballroom, her eyes fixed on her husband. The crowd parted for her, as if she were a ghost. "Husband," she said, her voice carrying a strength that had been forged in years of exile, "you host a party for our son, and you did not think to invite his mother?" Lord Marcus was speechless, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Seraphina turned to the stunned guests, including the horrified Crofton family. "For over a decade, my husband has allowed you to believe I was dead. This is a lie. I am not dead. I was forced to leave this house after discovering his repeated infidelities, including with the staff in our own home." The scandal in her words was a bomb exploding in the silent room. "He lied to protect his reputation," Seraphina continued, her voice ringing with the power of the truth. He lied to his friends, his peers, and for 10 long years he lied to our son, poisoning his heart with grief. "Lord Crofton," she said, looking directly at Annabel's father, "is this truly the family you wish to marry into? One built on a foundation of lies and moral rot?" The Crofton family looked at Lord Marcus with open disgust. The engagement was broken. His reputation was shattered. He was ruined. In the stunning silence, Darian didn't look at his father. He walked past the shocked guests to a small private door at the side of the ballroom. He opened it. Adeline was standing there, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. He had found her, just as he had promised, and brought her back to witness the final move. He took her hand, his touch warm and steady, and led her into the center of the room. He stopped before his mother, who looked at Adeline with a gentle, knowing smile. Darian then faced the entire assembly, his voice strong and unwavering, his grip on Adeline's hand tightening. "My father's plans for me are over," he announced. He looked down at Adeline, his eyes full of a love that was now free from shadows and secrets. "This is the woman I am going to marry." His words sealed his father's defeat and marked the beginning of their future. Later that evening, after the last of the scandalized guests had fled, the 3 of them stood in the quiet of the grand hall. Seraphina took Adeline's hands in her own. "He chose well," she said to Darian, her eyes shining with tears of pride. "Welcome to the family, my dear. It's time we had a lady of Stirlingwood with a true and honest heart." Darian pulled Adeline close, and in the home that had once been their prison, they were finally free. The game was over. They had won.